Alright, we're back with more NFL coverage, and in this one, I'll be covering all the action from Conference Championship Sunday. And by the end of it, at least two teams would be claiming their place in the Super Bowl in Santa Clara for Super Bowl 60, and two others through what has been a wild season already and a wildly competitive playoff slate of games. Two of them would have to be sent home. Have a tougher end to what could be deemed as a good season for them overall. Even if these teams after this may be of the belief that without even appearing in a Super Bowl, let alone winning one, it could go down as a failure in some of their eyes. You spill out all of the effort, all of your time, and all of your energy just to reach this point if you're any one of the few teams left standing to this point of time. Work in the offseason, generally speaking, OTAs, team practices throughout the season, different time off of the field, getting together, work in the weight room and things like that. Other training, additional training with, potential teammates, potential friends across the NFL over the summer. A number of different things that people have to do to get their body right, get their energy going by consuming the proper nutrition and things like that through a consistent, and I mean consistent. You should see how some of these schedules are for these people when it comes to dieting and things like that. But that is the life of such an athlete. And again, all of that being spent in the hopes that you are in good enough condition to be a core piece, or at least a valuable piece, to your team, regardless of how good you may be or elite you may be. It's all about what an entire 53-man roster can do when pitted up against another one, trying to do the exact same thing, trying to reach the exact same place in the grand scheme of things. And when you look at it, they're trying to take you down just as much as you would be looking forward to facing off against them and trying to get the upper hand on them to reach the next level. So, understanding how competitive these playoffs have already been, and what, again, has been honestly one of the better NFL seasons from a competition standpoint in recent memory, to be honest, and maybe of all time when looking at it from a broader scale. That is honestly the theme of these two games right here. No matter what happened in this one, no matter who would come out on top and who would lose in these situations, you got damn good football played yesterday. Watching both live, it was exceptional in the way that both of these games ended up going. Now, what I can say at this moment of time is that both of these games would be slugfests. They would be dogfights. However, the flow of these games would be executed in a completely different manner. And that is where we start off with the Patriots and Broncos, to provide a little bit of context before, talking about the game itself. Because again, even if a season might be defined by the way that a specific team goes out, when considering, playoffs have, just a single elimination game, basically. All you got to do is lose one time, and just like that, it is a wrap. And many people get caught up in looking at it in that way. But it's hard to, again, address any of these teams here who have gotten to this stage of the playoffs without understanding the journey that they underwent throughout the entire season. And again, possibly off-season leading up to it, to reach this point in the first place. I mean, the Patriots, it goes without saying for them. They're a young football team, a very young football team. And that showed last year after the firing of Gerard Mayo. They bring in the former Pat in Mike Vrabel, and in his first season of work, he's already got this team going. You can attribute that to coaching, and you can also attribute it to the fact that, on the other hand, you had one of the biggest offseason spending sprees when it came to free agency in NFL history. But it paid off. It's pretty much every single one of those guys, whether you look at Robert Spillane, whether you look at Milton Williams, whether you look at Carlton Davis III, whether you look at some of the offensive linemen that they were able to go and get in free agency as well, all of them have had a massive impact on this football team. And they bring in a nice blend. You know, you have your younger guys being flanked by that kind of veteran talent. It created a great mix for them that, you know, after the first few weeks, it was looking a little bit suspicious, but they were able to get right. They had about a 10-game winning streak, if I'm not mistaken. They were on a roll, and they rode that momentum all the way into the playoffs. Also, of course, Drake May, being as young as he is, and already being an MVP candidate, possibly the runner-up, you know, if things go a certain way, when considering that the NFL Honors is going to be in a couple of weeks, right? Potentially the runner-up, regardless of whether or not he does win it, and I would personally think that he does, but I digress. Nonetheless, in his second full season of work, he's up for consideration. There's been a clear ascent there, and he's got this team in prime position, you know, to potentially reach the Super Bowl this early, when it looked as though the Patriots were going to be in a rebuild for such a long period of time. It wasn't that far long ago that they've just lost Bill Belichick after having one of his worst seasons as a head coach with the franchise. And in just a matter of 2 years, they're right back where they've consistently been. Meanwhile, for the Broncos, similar thing. Sean Payton has gone through a ton of shit with this Denver team early on. And I'm not going to lie, with some of the stuff that's been developing over the past few years, this apparent beef with Russell Wilson, or whatever the hell that's about, yeah, it was just not a great start to his Broncos tenure. And considering that they traded draft capital, the Broncos did, to acquire the rights to the man for him to coach the team in the first place, it just made it a little worse to stomach for a while. But as they started to work Bo Nix into this offense last season, you could tell that they were on the rise a little bit. Plus, with how dangerous their defense was, it set them up to be playoff contenders in their first season, you know, as a pairing. And it did not go as smooth in that specific playoff game. But what have they done across the entire offseason themselves? They've mostly developed. And they were able to harness some true development amongst some of their offensive linemen. I wasn't even aware of the fact that you had Miners and Bowles, guys who have been much maligned, especially earlier in their careers. Like, consider that Miners was drafted to, I believe, the Titans. So he's been all around the place. All over the place in the NFL. Finds a home in Denver and becomes an all-pro caliber guard. And with Bo Nix's ability being amplified this season, with that kind of help, it made it a steady course. Now again, the Broncos did not always get the job done smoothly, but they've been proven to be battle-tested, even if they played down to their competition on a few occasions. To that point, 13 one-score victories had been the most in NFL history for them. So no matter what situation you put them in, they were going to be able to find a way to come out on top more often than not. And of course, that defense last year, that was so good for them, they elevated into historically great territory as one of the top 5 units in the entire league, with a sack total that neared that of the 1984 Bears squad, and with pretty much at least an elite player or a pair of elite players at every single level of that defense. Patrick Surtain, Riley Moss, Nick Benito, Riley Moss. I just said Riley Moss. Jeez. Talanoa Hufanga on the back end. Dre Greenlaw as well in the offseason as a pairing of guys that they poached from the 49ers in free agency have been solid for them as well, especially when Dre Greenlaw has been healthy. They haven't had him for the full season. So you tack on that kind of talent to a defense that's already on the right track to superstardom themselves, and you have yourself a very daunted pairing to have to confront if you are the Patriots entering this game. But you knew what? With the Broncos being the 1 seed and with this game being in Denver, Pats understood that they had to travel. They had to find a way to get right after the chaos that was the game against the Texans and put together enough of a game plan to not necessarily blow the brakes off the Broncos, but to do enough to win the game when it came down to the nitty-gritty. And that's exactly what this game was when you look at it. My thing for the Broncos was this. Yes, it hurt that they had Bo Nix suffer an ankle injury and a tear of the bone, pretty much, to end his season. And in his place, they had Jarrett Stidham. You know, you've been hearing it the whole week about how they genuinely trust the man and that they're not going to run this vanilla-style offense for him. They're going to want to go out there and be aggressive with him. Well, as commendable as that is, this first drive was just not a great start. Because my understanding would be you're going to want to alleviate some of the pressure off of them, especially earlier in the game, by establishing the run a little bit. However, with the tackling machine that is Robert Spillane, and with some help from other reinforcements, the first 2 runs were essentially no gains. You forced Denver into a 3rd and long, and this was going to be a battle of situational football all day. You knew Stidham, more often than not, was not going to have a high success rate on these downs, and they immediately pressured his ass. They nearly forced a turnover on the throw, but he was able to get away from it and get it out just in time to go 3 and out as the Patriots would get the ball back themselves. However, even though defenses were going to be great for both teams in this game as far as I'm concerned, and when it came down to it, yes, they played their asses off, both teams, in this game. You did not expect the Patriots, in a way, to deal with this stuff. Now, granted, their offense hasn't been the best across the entire postseason. Admittedly so. You know, they have not been as efficient as they would like, especially when it comes to 3rd down situations. They've been a little anemic at times, sometimes struggling to move the ball down the field and constantly having to settle even when they get in the red zone for field goals and things like that. So it wasn't explosive. However, they themselves, when it came down to the dropbacks, they struggled as well. I mean, granted, you have to give Hufanga credit on this specific pass attempt when they got into 3rd down. I mean, it was perfect. Like, he baited a blitz and then dropped right back into a hook coverage. And as you have Diggs running a slant, he also has help, got the leverage on the man. But with Hufanga being right there, it was all good. Crept right back in that area of the field for quick deflection to give the Broncos the ball right back. And it was there when you would get a shocking twist immediately from the Broncos here. Because I can guarantee you that no one expected Jarrett Stidham to, on 3rd and long, mind you, which is exactly where the Patriots wanted him all game. He got a cleaner pocket, and he fired a rifle down the field to Marvin Mims Jr. He actually got the beat on Christian Gonzalez, and he worked him right down the field for a 52-yard gain to get the Broncos in the red zone instantly, where he would eventually find Cortland Sutton for a 6-yard touchdown catch. I'm like, damn. They be calling that man Stiddy. So I was like, hey, that's how he's coming. That's how he's responding to the noise. That was a great play and a great sequence of plays to give the Broncos the lead in that moment and give them a bit of momentum. As honestly, with their ability on the defensive end, the Patriots had no answer, virtually. I mean, they were able to at times establish the run game themselves. And I mean, you have a pairing in Henderson and Stevenson who can get their yards at will at times. But again, they were playing them physically. So it's not like they were just getting a bunch of free yards down the field. No, they were settling for short gains, but timely enough games to keep the pressure on that interior. Ultimately, Stevenson was able to get them a first down, but with the pressure coming from Mr. Roach, one of the defensive tackles for the Broncos, along with Patrick Surtain being money in coverage, I just didn't understand it. Because you know that the Patriots in this situation, they're going to be relying on the run game and smash mouth football. They're not trying to send deep shots all over the field. But the minute they tried it, the very first time, they wanted to go for Patrick Surtain, the second on this play, because he's running a fly route, Kayshon Boutte is. And it's like, Boutte has been a capable wide receiver for them this season, we can say that. But he is no burner. So I don't understand. Like, he got no separation on him whatsoever. Surtain II completely bottled him up, and that led to another 3rd and long, where the Patriots still could not find success, thus punting the football again. And even when you look at their next drive following it, you have more pressure coming Drake May's way, which makes sense if you think about it. I mean, this wasn't even a play that necessarily involved Will Campbell being involved in giving up a sack. But with the youth of that team, and with the dominance that they have on the line of scrimmage, the interior and the front four for the Broncos, it felt like a mismatch at times. Like, you even had Robinson get this sack on Drake May. And at that point, it's like, okay, do you even stand a chance against this defensive line? Like, you're trying to block for him, but you are coming so far away from being successful that it's just not even a competition anymore. So the Patriots would have to punt again. And then ultimately, you get into yet another scenario where it seemed like they were going to have a little bit of life after what would be a much maligned call for Sean Payton in this situation. Because I will say that when you look at how this game went, going for this on 4th and short and trusting Jarrett Stidham in this scenario, in clear weather, to pick up a first down for you, even if it's a yard and even if you're on New England's 14-yard line, it probably would have been much better to kick a field goal there. And you would hear me say this multiple times watching the game live. Sean Payton was kicking himself over not going for the field goal there. You take yourself out of an opportunity for any points on that possession, and they'd done a decent job of driving down the field. You know, they took 6 minutes and 32 seconds off the clock. That has been a Broncos type of drive throughout this season. And they still could not find a way to get on the board after that. So that was highly unfortunate for them. It truly was. But with a chance to respond, they would back them up yet again. And if not for Mac Hollins holding on to the ball after bobbling it essentially on a dig route over to the right side of the field, if not for that, they probably have to go 3-and-out again. However, it moves the sticks for them, and they're starting to establish something seemingly a little bit before Zach Allen just waiting on a Drake May scramble. Inevitably, he caught him and held him to a no gain to give the ball right back to the Broncos, where things would just turn disastrous. Because if it wasn't bad enough in the moment that they turned down a field goal in fair weather, they started to ramp up the intensity on Jarrett Stidham. You know, he had a sequence of plays that showed you, okay, he's not going to be scared of this defense, and he is going to be able to withstand pressure every now and then and complete a few really good passes for you. Thing is, the Patriots, with the lack of a true run game from the Broncos themselves, were willing to place Jarrett Stidham in those situations repeatedly. And again, this is where the Broncos kind of, they just could not gain control in that regard. Now, granted, the personnel you have, R.J. Harvey and Jaleel McLaughlin, again, as pure runners, it's going to be hard for them to contribute being on the smaller end. As I said before, if J.K. Dobbins was playing in this game, the rushing attack would probably look a little different for this team. The thing is that J.K. Dobbins was still out with injury. I think it was mentioned throughout the broadcast that if the Broncos were to advance to the Super Bowl, there was a high chance that J.K. Dobbins would be ready and healthy for that. But as far as this game is concerned, he wasn't available. And I think that hurt them immensely. Like, he provides that blend of power for you that those two guys just can't. Like, R.J. Harvey has, again, at UCF proven that he can be a workhorse. But again, translate that from college to the NFL, it has not been the same for him. And maybe that can change in time, but you haven't seen it all season long. So to rely on it in the playoffs was a no-show. It just did not make sense to whatsoever. Then you had Jarrett Stidham as well, being a backup in this scenario, understanding he hadn't played in all that time, but knowing that you were more than likely going to have to be one-dimensional. You couldn't keep relying on the rushing attack, and you couldn't keep relying on a lot of the short throws that Bo Nix could execute fairly well when healthy. They tried to make such a thing happen on this third down after they started to, initiate a little bit of short, quick offense. However, on this play, Jarrett Stidham had nowhere to go. They overloaded it completely, and they forced him to run back all the fucking way. All the way. Ultimately, he's got a lineman on him at that point, and Christian Ellis is trying whatever to bring him down. However, for whatever reason, Jarrett Stidham just pushes the ball out of his hands. I don't think you can even call it a full throw attempt. And the ball falls over on the ground, with it rolling into the hands of Ponder as he recovers it and takes it into the end zone for seemingly a touchdown. The thing is, though, in that time, watching it live, they blew the play dead, and then on the field, they called it a standard incomplete pass. However, they reviewed the play, and I was thinking, okay, maybe it could stand as an incomplete pass. The refs ruled it at the time as a fumble recovered by the defense. They did not grant the Patriots the touchdown in that situation, but they granted them possession. No matter how you slice it, this was a huge turning point for them. As in just a matter of 2 plays, you had Drake May doing what he does at an elite level and scrambling right up the middle for a 6-yard touchdown run to tie up the game at that point. And you're thinking, if you're the Broncos, it's like, damn, if we get a good enough drive, we can keep the Patriots on ice. We can hold them scoreless in the first half if we get a long enough drive. Instead, before you know it, a single mistake changed the entire complexion of this ball game. And you could argue that the Patriots had the Broncos right where they wanted them, in a sense. Ultimately, this game came down to execution. This game came down to situational football. Yes, that word has been thrown out a lot, but that is how it is when you talk about postseason ball, especially when it comes to football terminology. I mean, hell, we just went through the same thing with the national championship game in college. And ultimately, with Indiana being able to execute more and more effectively in those situations, that's how they ended up winning that game. But I digress. We're not talking about college right now. We're talking about the pros. And in the pros, as far as this game was going, Christian Barmore had a lot of noise to make himself. You know, it's been all about Milton Williams. And granted, Barmore has had his fair share of troubles off the field. Yet, on the field, he made it a point to terrorize the interior of that offensive line. And he would creep in the backfield, pummeling Jarrett Stidham down for an 8-yard loss before the Broncos ultimately had to punt the ball again. Similar thing, though, for the Pats. Like, they could not initiate their own offense. And I was shocked to see because they would typically, try to give the ball to Hunter Henry in these situations just, to warm Drake May up and get him in a rhythm, establish a routine. He dropped this 3rd and 5 pass, to my surprise. And a reliable tight end for them, a man who put up career highs in yardage for them on the season, doing that in that situation was definitely unexpected. They had to settle for it again, but with Hunter Henry now bringing this one down, Patrick Surtain II made a good tackle in open space to force yet another 3 and out. And then, this was just an interesting sequence. Is both teams, with very short drives, had a chance to log field goals. However, both teams would miss. Now, the Will Lutz one is just kind of like, that is his range. So to have it miss in the fashion that it did was incredibly unfortunate. And while the Pats, their chances were slim, another scramble, a timely scramble at that, from Drake May, and a good enough slide, just in the nick of time with a single second left, to then call their final timeout. That shows you what it's all about right there. Understanding that you had that to work with and starting up the slide just before the clock hits all zeros in that situation was an incredible play. And if nothing else, whether you make it or miss it, there's an opportunity for you to get on the board. So you best take it. I will admit that this Andres Borregales field goal had the distance. They were asking him to kick a 63-yarder with the wind howling. And I mean just swirling all over the place in Denver before we even get to the weather change. Yes, there was an absolute weather change as this game would go forth. But Borregales did not have the accuracy in this situation, potentially affected by the wind. And it would miss horribly, as we would go into this half tied at 7-all. Now, this drive right here for the Pats would go down as the most important drive, in my opinion, of this game on their side. Because by no means, again, was their offense explosive. By no means was their offense pretty. And it wasn't going to change at all. Because, think about this for a second. Across the entire country, at this point, you have snowstorms taking place. The Patriots thought that they had escaped it. Because you get a frame of how it's looking in Denver and how it's looking in Gillette Stadium at a specific point in time. And Gillette Stadium was blanketed in snow. Could you fucking imagine if the Patriots had home field advantage and went there to play? Do you know how much work would have to be done on that field just to clear out enough of that to actually play on it? Because it's not like you can just postpone the game in that situation. And what makes it even crazier is that, again, when looking at it, they referenced it multiple times. The only reason the Broncos would get the 1 seed over the Pats is because of their record against common opponents being slightly better, with the Patriots losing to the Raiders in the very first week of action, surprisingly as that was. Imagine that butterfly effect. The Pats win that game. They have the 1 seed potentially. And again, that's assuming that everything else plays out exactly as it did anyways, which may be illogical. But to just entertain that for a second is crazy. Like, I could not imagine how they would confront that. But with that snow ramping up in Denver now, you started to get flurries. And it just started going rapid fire into a full-on swirl at times. You pair up the wind with the fact that you have all this snow falling down and blowing right in your face. You have some starting to stick to the ground and create that atmosphere on the field. It was going to get chaotic. And so at that point, whatever you could do to establish ball control, you had to do it. And luckily enough, the Patriots, just before all of what I just said started going on, made that happen. Because they would go on essentially a 9-minute drive down the field. And when it came down to it, even with them not picking up a ton of yardage consistently, being able to get ahead of the sticks, which is exactly what they've wanted to do all season long, and have the right play call seemingly every time in these situations was everything. Whether it be a Ramondre Stevenson run to pick up 3 yards, whether it be him again toting up another solid run up the gut for 12 yards to move the chains there, or Drake May again without a quarterback spy in place, which makes no sense in that situation. He took advantage of a wide open lane to move 28 yards down the field and get them in the red zone of Denver at that point. Now, they were stymied for a second, but ultimately, with the combination of Hunter Henry being able to get close enough through sheer willpower for a near first down, and then this 4th down as well, because the Patriots at that point were in a similar position to the Broncos. Maybe you have a quarterback that you can trust in that situation, but maybe you're also contemplating taking your points. And so this decision was going to be important for them. They somehow got it done. And it was crazy. This play was set up to where they had both Milton Williams and Kairos Tonga, both of their defensive linemen, in the backfield trying to provide an extra push. And with a little bit of second effort, Drake May was able to get just over the line. On the helicopter view, I guess, sky cam, if we can say, it looked as though he was short for just a second. I'm not even going to lie to you. But on the field, they would challenge it to make sure that everything was good, and they allowed the call to stand. So you get first down in their red zone where the Broncos hold up. It's been the Patriots' defense for most of this playoff run that has been great in the red zone against teams. And the Broncos themselves would establish a little bit of that, with Jonathan Cooper, the Ohio State man, getting a well-timed sack to give Barragallas a chance to take the 10-7 lead. And with the snow starting to fall now, with a majority of the third quarter being taken, even though Denver was at home in this situation, all the pressure was on them. Because now you have a situation where you are going to want to force Jarrett Stidham to battle back from behind. Something that, again, he has not experienced in quite a while. Add on to the fact that the Broncos are not able to establish that much of a run game, and the fact that snow would naturally make it harder with its slick quality, and its ability to melt on the ball at times can make it slippery. The traction can start to be lost, and that's for both sides. So you would have to do double, maybe even triple the work just to get a few yards at a time. And you're trailing in this situation. The Broncos needed something, though, and it just never came. You'd get a 3-and-out here, and the Pats, even with all that going down, they would find a way to get it done, at least early. You know, these are still the early stages of it. It still hasn't gained as much traction on the field just yet. But you get a couple of really good plays here. You have Drake May again taking advantage of the fact that there is no spy whatsoever. I did not understand that, man. I truly didn't. But, okay. Nevertheless, would also have him throw a dime to Mac Hollins on a flea flicker. And I'm thinking, okay, to call one in that situation when it's snowing outside and it's already long developing, it might not have gone so high. And granted, in that specific situation, Singleton almost crashed in on this play to bring it to a halt. But May had just enough time to float it up, lob it over everyone's head, and put it only where Mac Hollins could catch it. So that's a great play. Despite all that, they would be stopped in Denver territory, and Borregales, with the wind starting to ramp up, would end up missing a 46-yard field goal here. The fourth quarter was just, again, truly a chess match of epic proportions, because you were not getting scoring. I can promise you that right now. It was not happening. Now, I will say, this, some of the play calls that were produced from the Broncos side, I didn't completely understand. Some of them were fine. However, Marvin Mims Jr. in this situation, it's I don't know, you're looking for a screen pass, I suppose, and they just did not get a good enough amount of yardage on this. They were able, the Pats, to contain it well and force a third and very long. Marcus Jones also had great coverage on this LeJordan Humphrey route to force the 3-and-out there. But the Broncos had just about as good of a response as you could ask for. And I mean consistently. A similar way. This was a clean ball game for most of the game, by the way. So it's not like turnovers were dictating much of anything here. You had two great defenses going at it, trying to outdo the other consistently. And with more pressure being brought Drake May's way in this situation, they would also lose a great amount of yardage and have to punt the football here. Now, the Broncos themselves, again, had multiple chances to potentially take this over. But I don't know what the fuck this play was. Think about this. They pick up a first down beforehand. They get to a 2nd and long on their own 43-yard line. And they run a sort of quad set, if you will. Okay? And I just did not understand why the fuck they had a setup where Evan Ingram, one of the wide receivers, on the inside of this particular formation, they decided to call a screen for him. Now, again, it was also covered very well, but it's set up so badly, and then you had Stidham throw it right at McGlinchey's hip. It was a horrible play call in that situation. And I get that, again, you aren't trying to send the ball too deep because your visibility now, as this snow is starting to ramp up, it's becoming harder to see out there. It got so bad on the broadcast, they had to superimpose the fonts of the numbers on the field. They had to, bring a bit more visibility to the down lines, to the hash marks on both sides of the field. That's how much it was snowing out there. So you can imagine how much more difficult it would be to play in that situation and try to make out who's moving downfield And not only that, but who is in the area as a Patriot. They're wearing the white jersey, so it's going to blend right in if you're not careful. And you may end up placing yourself in a situation where you have a costly takeaway. Foreshadowing. But as for this drive right here, they would promptly have to punt after that. And as the Broncos have done all season long, you know that their defense is going to get it back, no matter how slow the offense will play in a game. That defense is too legit to ever really break in a situation like this. And again, having home field advantage helps. Having those conditions in that situation be able to help slow this offense down as well, it's a huge bonus. So they would force another 3-and-out. And it's here where the Broncos had a massive opportunity. Because even with that weather going down, it did not stop the potential for anything crazy to happen. And I mean, we'd already seen a lot of special teams miscues. If anything, that is what was largely looming over this game. Because between both teams, you already had the sequence where they missed on back-to-back possessions in terms of field goals. At this point of time, they mentioned that this is the first conference championship game with at least 3 missed field goals since 1991. Ironically enough, Denver was playing Buffalo in that specific matchup when this previously happened. So, field goals were not guaranteed. No matter how great of a field position you had, they weren't a guarantee. And that's fair. You would get that same kind of misfortune on this punt from Bryce Behringer, though. I mean, it was just a full-fledged shank. Now, you could attribute that to, again, with him having to move out there like that. Even though, they probably tried to clear some things out. Thing is, your cleats are still that wet and that slick. And you're now having to go through all this motion just to kick a ball being as slick as well. Not a great mixture. And he would shank it to where the Broncos had starting field position at the Patriots' 33-yard line. And you're thinking, damn, you're golden. All you need is a touchdown in the situation. And with this low pace, you more than likely establish an opportunity to take the lead, steal all the momentum, carve out another stop from that defense, and potentially win the entire thing. Because that's what this felt like at this point. You want to know what the Broncos proceeded to do next? Not only would they start off the drive terribly, with again not being able to get R.J. Harvey going at all. Tonga, Carlton Davis III, and others were just bottling him up in the backfield. No matter what they tried to do. They tried to run it with him. He got stuff. They tried to pitch it out to him on a catch, as he's been, again, a kind of multi-purpose back for them across the entire year. Same thing that was going on at UCF, so it's not a surprise. They limited that completely. And that element forced another 3rd and long that they could not pick up. Now, they were choosing to kick the field goal here. And yes, at that point, snow was coating the entire surface. They just went straight ahead and kicked it, trusting in Will Lutz. And while it might have had the distance, Taylor III, one of their backup defensive tackles, would actually elevate for a timely block to force another missed field goal, 4 on the day now between both squads, and the stop in that situation to give the Patriots the ball back. They probably could have tried to clear things up for damn sure in that situation. Like, you've got about a few good inches of snow on that field, and in a short amount of time, I might add. So, trying to make sure you have the right snap in that situation, knowing that it's going to be affected with you not clearing up anything at all, going to be affected by some snow. And maybe that played a factor into it, but it is also a damn good play from Taylor III. Again, probably not a guy who's played much for this team, but stepping up at the right time when they needed a play. And when that offense was absolutely in trouble, in absolute danger. Could you imagine how this would have been if they were trailing, or if this was tied and they were asked to have to go down the field and put together a drive to either settle for a field goal themselves or try to take a touchdown entirely? Instead, they could play as if they were ahead, which they still were at the time. And that helped immensely in this situation. That clock was winding down. And they would start to just settle for running the football. At that point, you're just trying to keep it away from the Broncos. You're not trying to give them enough of an opportunity to make anything happen. In Denver, seeing this, they would call their second timeout, forcing a 3-and-out again, as the Patriots just had not, again, done much of anything all game on that front. With the Broncos here, you had 3 minutes left and another chance, another opportunity to do something. My thinking was that you would have to score a touchdown here because there's just no way. 4 missed field goals at this point. You already just missed one on the last drive. You have a timeout to work with still, and the ball is in your court. But you have got to, in their scenario, move the ball down the field. Unfortunately for them, the time for Jarrett Stidham to be forced into a critical mistake would come, as without a run game in that situation, and feeling a sense of urgency, even though they called this play at the 2-minute 18-second mark. Surprisingly to me, I think you'd want to get to the line much faster than that. So that was already a red flag as it was, right? But he drops back, Stidham. And, man, I get that you want to be urgent in that situation. Maybe the feeling was that you needed at least one chunk play to get this ball down the field. And maybe that's correct thinking. You're on your own 33. The thing is, it felt more like a panic throw. And you cannot have a situation where you do that scared. Because if you do, the defense is more than likely to capitalize on it, which is exactly what happened. The throw itself was affected mightily by the wind, you could argue. I do think that Stidham was trying to send that ball much deeper. But the entire point of settling for short pass after short pass throughout the entire game is exactly for that reason. Because it would just completely miss. And it started to just curve right back into the area of Christian Gonzalez. He stops his coverage in that moment, undercuts the ball, and makes a great play on it for the interception. That could potentially seal the deal for the Pats at that point. They're on their own side of the field, yes, but with a single timeout and nearing the 2-minute warning, with the way that the Patriots have been clamping up on defense themselves, it's not like the Broncos were really going to be able to do much of anything either. And again, even though it might not have all been on Jarrett Stidham, you're asking a backup who had not played in that much time to, if you do get the ball back, pitch a drive all the way down the field in the final 2 minutes to potentially win the game and take them to the Super Bowl. It's a lot to ask out of one man. Of course, the most important thing would be them getting the ball back first, which did not happen. As New England would pull out the gutsiest shit. For the past few drives on end, they had been running the football specifically with Ramondre Stevenson, exclusively, trying to establish that power. And it did help them a little bit. It did help to bleed some time out. It did help to wear that defense down. So from that perspective, it did its job. However, on this third down, they would fake it. They ran a play action fake boot essentially. And you had Drake May run it with Jonah Ellis in pursuit. And at that point, it was a foot race. We all know who was winning that battle, and it would be none other than Drake May scraping out a first down gain, flexing on the sideline, and effectively ending the game, giving the Patriots the 10-7 win as they essentially just took a knee for the rest of the game to become AFC champions and get themselves to a Super Bowl. And I'm just like, man, that is exceptional work. This was a game that honestly, you can't define by numbers. You just can't. And maybe you could argue that when it comes to the offensive side of the football for a good number of these Patriots performances. They ran the ball for 141 yards, but not on spectacular efficiency. And Drake May himself, from a completion percentage standpoint, a man that nearly led the league in that category at his young age, was held to 47.6% completion in this game through just 21 passes and had a total of 151 yards with the rushing touchdown. Those are not numbers that will jump off the page, but it got the job done. And they deserve credit for that. The Patriots deserve a massive amount of respect for that. Because you have to consider this. You understand that they are a team who did have one of the easiest schedules in NFL history. The easiest in terms of strength of schedule for a team of this kind since 1999, when the Rams had a easier strength of schedule to face off against, as they, that year, reached the Super Bowl. People have used that metric to try to crap on this team and try to make it seem as though they don't deserve to be in this position. At the same time, with them now being in Santa Clara, they more than earned it. And you have to understand from that standpoint all that comes with it and what they had to do to get there. As I've been saying throughout this time, leading into talking about this specific game, consider this. Mike Vrabel, as a player with this team, a linebacker, was prolific and a huge piece to 3 Super Bowl teams at that time. They went through a downtrodden time in Foxborough, and they tried last year to establish a little bit of a rhythm by having another former Patriots linebacker in Gerard Mayo take over the starting job. Did not have success with it, and they took a chance on the man in Mike Vrabel that brought the Titans of all teams, yes, the Titans, to an AFC championship game. Got them back on the right track. And it didn't end as well as he would have wanted. He took a year off to potentially get right and kind of rejuvenate himself, his operation as a coach, if you will. And he gets to this Patriots team returning as a coach this time, accomplishing something that rarely happens in NFL history. As I mentioned via a graphic on the broadcast and in the trophy ceremony, Vrabel became the second coach since Gary Kubiak with Denver to reach a Super Bowl with the same team as a player and a coach. And ironically enough, right, like, you just took down Denver to reach this point and then have that milestone happen for you. But that deserves a ton of respect. And, depending on how things go, if Vrabel were to win the Super Bowl, he'd be the first ever to win for the same franchise as a player and as a coach. That is just crazy. Also, consider this. With them now winning on the road again, they held throughout the regular season a 9-0 record on the road. The best in NFL history. And the most wins on the road in NFL history. So it's not like they just, coasted their way to a Super Bowl, if people want to argue that. Maybe the road to get there in the regular season was a bit easier. Sure. However, not only did they have this record on the road, but with every single team that they faced off against in the playoffs to this point. The Steelers, the Texans, and the Broncos. The Steelers, again, as a defense, they weren't at the peak of their powers this season, but they were really good. Well, no. No. Hold on. Yeah. Whoa. Patriots in this playoff run faced off against the Chargers, the Texans, and the Broncos. Yes, they had home field advantage for a couple of those games. But all those teams finished at least top 5 in terms of overall defense in the NFL. And say what you want about them in the regular season, but the Patriots, the 2025 Patriots, became the first NFL team to beat at least 3 top 5 defenses en route to a Super Bowl. No other team has done that. See, you can say that they might have had an easy ride there. However, regardless of, talking about how poorly they have played offensively and how great they've been defensively, no matter how you want to view it, they have found a way time and again to get the job done and win the game in front of them. To advance, and advance again, and now advance again to Santa Clara to a Super Bowl. So you can't just completely discredit what they've been able to do to this point. Plus, consider this notion as well before moving on. Because Stephon Diggs, as I'd said myself, in terms of overall reputation, maybe not with every single playoff game he's ever played in, but his reputation in the playoffs, he's been a fucking monster. Look no further than the Minneapolis Miracle. Look no further than some of what he was doing for Buffalo as the primary wide receiver, especially in their earliest postseason runs in this decade, with him on the roster. Been nothing short of Mr. Consistent in this time. And coming into this game, he was one of 2 to put up as many catches as they have in the postseason without making a Super Bowl. And, with some of his work in this game, he would temporarily have a hold on that. But finally, after all this time, through it all, consider that, one, been in the NFL for 11 years. Was doing that with Minnesota but never broke through. Was doing that with Buffalo but never broke through. Houston suffered a season-ending injury in the first half of that season. So that was just completely out of the realm of possibility for him. And getting to New England, being able to do this wasn't a guarantee. But with him being a valuable piece as well to have in helping Drake May progress like this. And then do enough in the playoffs to finally reach a Super Bowl after all that time. You can imagine just how happy he was about it. And he was emotional about it. There was something with him after the game explaining it. Essentially alluding to those similar points about how he's been in the league for all this time. And that he was genuinely feeling like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders in a way to be in said position. So you have an interesting blend here. Like, they're a young team led by a group of intellectual and battle-tested veteran minds and they've gone all the way through. They are the AFC champions and will be representing them in Santa Clara. But now, with that being said, one would have to ask themselves in that situation, who would be joining them? Because if you thought that came down to the wire and was a slugfest of defensive proportions, well, now you have to deal with this Rams and Seahawks game. It goes without saying. The third time that these teams have been facing off against each other this season, to the point where we know what happened in the last game. And people may still be on cloud nine after that. But no matter how you slice it, neither of these two teams are a joke in any sense of the word. You want to know just how competitive this was throughout the regular season. The season series was split to this point, and the games were separated literally by a single point and a single yard. That is how competitive the shit had gotten. And you were going to get more of the same in playoff form. Consider this, because I didn't note these graphics specifically, but they are relevant in that they mentioned the Seahawks had been 3-1 in conference championship games all time. Meanwhile, this is also the third time that the Rams and Seahawks have faced against each other in the playoffs. And the Rams, to this point, were 2-0, with their last win coming in the 2021 wild card game that I watched live, with them just completely beating the brakes off of the Seahawks in that game, 30-20. That score does not tell the full story. Man, if you were a Seahawks fan, you definitely wanted a different result than that. Keep in mind as well that this was also the first playoff game since Super Bowl 51, featuring a face-off between the number one scoring defense in the Seahawks and the number one scoring offense in the Rams in a regular season. So, man, you were going to get some fireworks in this game potentially. And that's how it's been for them. Now, people could always assume this about the Rams. And that makes sense. I mean, hell, they won a Super Bowl in this decade. The very first season that Matthew Stafford got there. And one could argue, with what he's been able to do with this offense this season, what McVay has been able to do in terms of putting every single one of those guys in the best possible situations to succeed. Whether you look at Devontae Adams being a red zone weapon, whether you look at Nacua just being an all-world athlete and an all-world receiver, to the point where he and Jackson Smith and Jigba into this game were unanimous all-pro selections at the wide receiver position. And not to mention how they can balance it out with their rushing duo of Blake Corum and Kyron Williams. A truly elite offense that can give most any defense nightmares. They've been nothing short of excellent for at least most of the season. And things did start to tail off in the second half. When you look at it from a defensive standpoint, and even with some of their performances as of late, it had not been a clean playoff stretch for them. They had to scrape by the Panthers. They had to scrape by the Bears. They wanted to leave no doubt about what they could put together in this matchup, especially with the way that overtime game had went. Because you did everything you needed to do from their perspective coming into this. The most yards given up by the Seahawks defense this season. The most passing yards given up by the Seahawks defense this season. Without a turnover in that game. You did everything you needed to do. And it came down to a few plays. Whether you look at the punt by Rashid Shaheed, returned for a massive touchdown. Whether you look at the fumble 2-point conversion pickup by Charbonnet. Whether you look at the 2-point conversion caught by Sauber for the game. A few plays made up the difference between you being the 1 seed and potentially hosting this game in SoFi. And being there in Seattle. Having to deal with that crowd in that setting. So, in this game, leave no fucking doubt. Do whatever you have to do to take this team down. In all 3 phases of the game, mind you. Get it done. It's as simple as that. The Rams have established themselves as consistent playoff contenders over the last few seasons. And again, not just one and dones. Like, they're genuine Super Bowl contenders. We have a chance to take down our divisional rival to get there and win the season series. That revenge could be sweet. They've been waiting for this moment. So they had to seize it. And from the Seahawks' perspective, people, especially in the offseason, when you look at them making some tough choices, releasing Tyler Lockett, trading DK Metcalf, picking up Sam Darnold and DeMarcus Lawrence and Cooper Kupp in essentially a 3-day span. You weren't expecting too much there. Also, with some of what they were able to do in the draft as well. Between doing a number of things that people wouldn't expect. And they are here regardless. John Schneider is a fucking mastermind. We already knew this with him being one of the best GMs in the league generally. And then it just turned up even more this season. Because no matter where you look at it from, the team to this point is so well-rounded. Again, clearly coming into this as a top defense. Nick Amon-Wari has been nothing short of a fucking steal. Coming into the game, he is up for Defensive Rookie of the Year honors. And he more than deserves them. Because when he's been healthy, like, you see the Derwin James Jr. comp, and then you watch him play. And it's like, oh, okay, I understand exactly why he's getting that kind of comparison right now. And he's performed at a high level. On top of the fact that you have a number of veteran players around him and some younger guys who have now progressed into their second and third years that have also been so fucking good at their positions. All over the board, Devin Witherspoon, Tariq Woolen, Julian Love as a free agent for this team from the Giants. Leonard Williams as a free agent from this team from the Giants. DeMarcus Lawrence, aforementioned. Ernest Jones the fourth. All over the board. And even when you look at some of the other guys that may not get as much recognition, the Kobe Bryants, the Ty Cotta stepping up this season and handling business when Julian Love was out. The Josh Jobs not being the best guy in terms of physical, matchups when it comes to size, but still doing enough to warrant a starting level position on this team and be reliable enough to make a few good plays for you. Drake Thomas emerging as a starting caliber linebacker for this team. Boye Mafe, when healthy, providing good pressure. Like, the defense, again, overall, could be seen as their greatest strength throughout the season. And especially in that 49ers game, to open up their playoff run, you saw exactly just how dominant they could be. It was a matchup nightmare from the jump. That's how bad that game got. But it was not going to be easy against this Rams team. Again, hanging that kind of contribution on you, and you still found a way to win. If you were able to, force a few turnovers, make Matthew Stafford a little uncomfortable in these scenarios, you may give yourself a much better chance. It's going to come down to a few plays. You understood that the Rams were going to be able to get theirs at times. But if you had responses in the right moments, you were more than set. And as much respect as the defense gets from the media, they deserve the praise. Then those same people forget that you have a dynamic offense too, who was also top 5 in scoring. And they've got a few good weapons themselves. The ascent of Jackson Smith and Jigba has been well documented throughout the season, with again, not only having a unanimous All-Pro selection, first team, but is also up, along with Puka Nacua, for Offensive Player of the Year when the NFL honors get underway in a couple of weeks. And the signs could have always been there, but he had to put together a season like this for other people outside of specific areas. Whether you look at, it from a Seahawks standpoint, whether you look at it from general fans, this season put everybody on notice. And you, no matter what, do have that status established for yourself as one of the top wide receivers in the league generally. There is no question about that anymore. The thing was, could he and would he perform in this situation? Could he and would he go out there as the primary target, as the best player, and still be rendered effective with the entire defense keying in on him? Now, granted, last week, you can't really hold too much against him, with that being his first playoff appearance. And again, with the way that game went, you didn't ask Sam Darnold to do that much. You did not need a whole lot of passes in that game. But at the very least, he did get a touchdown. He did have 3 catches for 19 yards. You may expect more, especially in a game like this. But that's no problem. Jackson Smith and Jigba is more than proven throughout the entire year. Look no further than Week 16, where he had 8 catches for 96 yards and a touchdown in the second half in overtime of that game. No matter what scenario you place him in, no matter what area of the field you put him in, there's always going to be a desire to want to get him the football. And for the Seahawks, with Sam Darnold especially now having to deal with all this over the years, and especially when it comes to this specific team, with the fact that he'd been that turnover prone against them in the first 2 games and won a major game, stepped up in overtime and completely changed the narrative about himself. But for others, it was still about seeing if he could do it on the biggest stage. Never has he appeared in a situation like this, and never has he been asked to lead a team in this scenario and take over a ball game on his own volition to help them get the upper hand on their opponent and win. And this was going to be a test. Would he answer the call? We would have to see. It was going to be important for him to withstand a bit of pressure every now and then and protect the football. With a run game flanking him too, that could be made a little easier. Kenneth Walker III himself still put together a great overall season, even if you consider that a lot of the touchdowns off the board were taken by Zach Charbonnet in terms of power scenarios, although he is obviously out for the season. And so that made things a little interesting from that perspective. Maybe you need a little more from Kenneth Walker III than you expected, with him now being the lead guy and also having George Holani called up to contribute in this particular game in relief, if need be. No matter how you slice it, and yes, that is a very long intro into the game itself. But again, context matters. And when you look at how these two teams have performed throughout the season, they've been so great that you've had people consistently say that the winner of this particular game could, in fact, win the entire thing. You've had people saying that this particular game is the damn Super Bowl. Because they were not expecting Jarrett Stidham in that game. And honestly, he played well. And damn, I guess I transitioned into this early. I can handle the Broncos. It's gonna be a little weird. I'll give the Broncos their respects a little later after I talk about this game. Because I just completely went away from talking about that. Damn, that's crazy. But again, as far as this game goes, those kinds of sentiments are being expressed by others. This was going to be a show. And right off the gates, the game itself got started in a similar way to how it did in the Week 16 matchup. Because if you remember, you get an early 4th down stop on Kyren Williams in that particular game as the Seahawks get the ball back and then establish momentum getting down the field with a massive Kenneth Walker III game and ultimately scoring a touchdown on that particular drive to take the early 7-0 lead. Similar thing here. And it started out so damn good. I ain't gonna lie. They kept the Nacua gains shorter because that was my key. He could not go off for a 225-yard game again. He may get his, but not anything like that. Well, Tariq Woolen, the much maligned cornerback, at least earlier in the season, has started to regain that trust. We've seen it. You know, Job was getting starting reps over him for a while. He's regained those. And early on, they would put enough faith in him, a guy who is 6'4" in his own respect and has that kind of speed, to go man on man with Nacua. And he locked his ass up, ultimately forcing a 3-and-out in that situation as the Seahawks would get the ball deep in their own territory. And man, oh man, oh man. For context, oh my gosh, because I'm going to have some fun with this. Because we'll get to Cam Curl in a second. We'll get to his ass in a second. The hard-hitting safety as he is. We'll get over to him in just a bit. But Sam Darnold, even with dealing with an oblique injury, this man called his shot and said that if it's open, I'm going to let it rip. First or second drop back for him on 3rd and 5. And he uncorks a dime down the field to a streaking Rashid Shaheed. They decided to press him up with Darius Williams, and he beat him so damn well that there was no doubt he was bringing down the football in that situation. Runs for a 51-yard gain down the field to instantly set the motherfucking tone in this game. And move the sticks mightily, setting up the Seahawks to get near the red zone of the Rams before Jackson Smith and Jigba would take a screen route 16 yards down the field to cement that. And ultimately, they would lean on Kenneth Walker III, who would bounce it outside for a 2-yard touchdown run to take the 7-0 lead. But you understood that inevitably, at some point in this game, there was going to be a response. It was not going to be that easy always, but if you could keep that consistency going, you were definitely going to establish a fair amount of control. And they did early. The Rams themselves decided that, hey, we're going to put Nacua in man-to-man position again if that's how you're going to play it. Keep in mind, throughout the entire game, and they mentioned at a certain point that the Seahawks, I think this number would fluctuate, past this point. But at a time, the Seahawks ran man coverage on 59% of their plays. They're a team that predominantly runs that shell, that zone coverage. And it is absolutely suffocating. They had to blend it a little bit, though. Because with Davante Adams being back in this game and available, you had to at least watch one of those guys at one time. You could not give them both the free reign to just run all over the place. The thing is, it was just a little weird. Like, there were multiple times where they manned him up and you had players just completely slip out of position as Stafford would just uncork some dots himself. I mean, take this play for example. You get 2nd and 7 and you have Nacua just moss the hell out of Devin Witherspoon as he is going up with his hand like this. Now again, Devin Witherspoon is a great overall cornerback. No question. But with Nacua being that physical, having that kind of leverage on him as it is, and just being in better position, there isn't much that a corner can do in that specific situation. He tried to break the ball up. He tried. And hands are just too fucking strong, bro. But the Seahawks, in that situation, they would hold strong. You would have them force a field goal from there, which Mevis would make from 44 yards. And the Seahawks would get the ball right back, establishing a little more ball control here. Things got a little risque. It looked for a second like A.J. Barner fumbled that ball, and I guess they say he did. But nonetheless, the fake was so good, he got the first down anyways, and it was out of bounds, so it didn't end up mattering too much. You also had Kenneth Walker III early on in this game continue to take advantage of open space, whether it was rushing the football up the gut or whether it was him getting out on screen plays and just making people miss for huge gains down the field to continue to keep it rolling. Man, hey, bruh. I ain't even gonna lie to you, dog. Oh, man. Because it was already bad enough that Roger McCreary and Quentin Lake, who is Quentin Lake, by the way, both of them niggas were going through this shit this entire game. It was Roger McCreary just getting trucked over by Kenneth Walker III at multiple occasions, and you also had Quentin Lake just getting cooked. But it would be Jacoby Durant's turn because you would have a fake go down and you would have Jackson Smith and Jigba running crossing route in the red zone, which he would bring down with a one-handed snag on the sideline to move the sticks there. It was rolling for the Seahawks and it was looking for a second like they could score another touchdown to blow this thing wide open. Procedural issues would become a bit of a theme at some critical points for both teams. And it would hurt them here as you would have Bradford pick up a holding penalty that would eventually force them to settle for a 27-yard field goal. It ain't the worst thing in the world. You still have control. You still have a touchdown lead. But man, those are things that you just want to clean up in this scenario, especially in the conference championship game. You know, you don't want to leave points on the board if you don't have to. The Rams, on this particular drive, they started to establish a little bit of the run game, not fully, but with Kyron Williams getting an 11-yard run, it allowed them to take a bit of control of the trenches. And at that point, they started to operate in attack mode on the passing side of things. You know, that's how they run their game. It's consistent play action and 13 personnel, and they will do anything they can to get their weapons out in open space to make plays. Davante Adams' release is so nasty, man. And he just completely forced another tough slip from a Seahawks cornerback on a slant route that eventually went down the field for a 23-yard gain. Even with that going down and even with them nearing the red zone, it would be Nick Amon-Wari with the versatility, not only forcing a no gain on the run, but then subsequently getting out in coverage and deflecting a pass attempted for Davante Adams. Getting all up in his grill. There was a little bit of grabbing, but it was fair. He was looking at the ball, and he got a great enough break on it to force the incompletion. Then you get a situation where, honestly, the Seahawks might have gotten away with a face mask penalty. They didn't call it, and DeMarcus Lawrence was able to get enough pressure on that point to get a sack on Matthew Stafford, forcing another field goal for the Rams in this situation. As tough as this sequence was, because you get a great start with Jackson Smith and Jigba getting hit up over the middle on a essential curl route. Thing is, a fumble in this scenario is just the worst thing that could happen for the Seahawks, because they themselves would also very much like to stay ahead of schedule. And Braden Fisk, crashing in from the rafters like his buddy Jarrett Verse, would make this way more difficult on the Seahawks here. They were forced to punt in that situation, and they nearly lucked out of it, as Xavier Smith, their return man, would muff it. He somehow got his own muffed punt back, and the Rams would get the ball from there. Foreshadowing. However, at that point, you have 9 minutes left in this quarter. And so the Rams, in this case, their mindset was simply to just establish some of their own momentum. At this point, the Seahawks had something like a, maybe it was evening out a little bit, but essentially they were nearing like 10 overall minutes of time of possession, if I'm not mistaken, to somewhere around 5 after the first quarter, and then again it got even worse with that start in the second quarter. They were very much losing that battle, and they needed to try to do whatever they could to get on the right side of it and get themselves a touchdown. They would effectively do both. Blake Corum is just such an interesting character, man. Like, fuck Michigan, but the dude, quite literally, himself, being a running back by committee in this situation, would get them started off well. Consistently grinding out solid games to keep the Rams in manageable territory on second and third down and so on and so forth. It didn't even have to get to that point at times when you have Nacua being able to, again, take advantage of just absolute mismatches. Whether it be him manned up against somebody, whether it, be zone coverage, they still did not have enough of an answer for him. And at that point, Stafford's too good to not be able to find him down the field, which would end up happening. You also have Blake Corum again continue to do damage, this time bouncing it outside smartly. This was a great play call from the Rams side, I'm not going to lie. Because at that point, this long handoff attempt by Stafford is going to look like a play-action play. But they delayed it for so long, and it became a draw. With everybody collapsing to that side, Corum smartly bounced it over to the left side of the field, and nobody really had the great angle they would need to bring him down immediately. Just burst ahead for a 19-yard gain. And then it was Kyren Williams' time, with him ultimately being able to do similar damage in both the rushing and receiving attack. When it came to this score at this point, the Rams did everything they needed to do. We went from 9 minutes left in this game and reached the 2-minute warning. A truly effective drive from them, and they wanted to cap it off the right way. I think on this play, Kobe Bryant was supposed to be covering Kyren Williams out of the backfield. However, there was such an aggressive jam on him with the pick routes that he got completely lost. And at that point, in the flats, Williams was wide open and just did that jump hurdle into the end zone that he typically does for a 9-yard touchdown catch to give the Rams a 13-10 lead with a minute and 55 left in the half. They completely snatched back control of this game. And with them also forcing a quick 3-and-out, as you would have Jacoby Durant get a well-timed incompletion, along with some pressure on third down that nearly paid off, and pretty much did, if only Holani would have caught the ball on this play. It was smart. They loaded up the box, and there was a full house. Holani smartly chipped and leaked out at the right time to potentially catch what might have been a long touchdown pass, if not a huge gainer down the field. It was not the best pass under pressure from Sam Darnold in this situation, but also, he just got turned around, and I'm like, if you put yourself in better position to catch it, you may honestly end up coming down with it. It was just a weird sequence. But credit to the Rams for being able to get the stop. They forced it, and it looked as though they could close out the half accordingly. But with them trying to get a little greedy, they would find the fuck out immediately. Because they got a nice run to start off. They did. And the Seahawks to this point still had all three of their timeouts. So, I mean, they could do whatever they wanted here. It was on them. But the Rams, they had a chance with the Seahawks, getting the ball to start out the second half. They had a chance to at least just steal a possession away from them. Make sure they don't touch the ball again and potentially get yourself on the board to, again, maintain that semblance of a hold on this game. After that run, they kept on trying to test Nick Amawari, and his ass would not only force a deflection on Nacua, guarding him man-to-man, but also out of the backfield, he would account for Ronnie Rivers and crush him with a deflection to force a 3-and-out and allow the Seahawks to retain all of their timeouts. Worst possible scenario that could happen for the Rams in this case. And it got even worse because Cameron Curl, the Rams secondary essentially, and with what he said on like the Skip Bayless show or some shit like that, we're going to be like wide receivers with all of these passes that Sam Darnold is going to throw our way. And that's how we're coming on the defensive side of the ball. Talking all that shit everywhere. And what happened to Cameron Curl in this game? On this next play, as Jackson Smith and Jigba was already heating up, they call a fake in Darnold with Jackson Smith and Jigba running a corner and then working his way back over the middle of the field. He heaves this shit down the field. Heaves it. And there's safety help there, but it's well thrown to where Jackson Smith and Jigba has enough time to adjust to the ball. Not only does he come down with this beauty of a fucking catch in the air, but he also takes a hell of a shot from the hard-hitting Cameron Curl to hang on to the ball and move the motherfucking chains. Good hit by Cameron Curl, but nigga, we take those. And then you have people talking about the fact that Jackson Smith and Jigba can't play through contact. So you see that play go down with him hanging on to possession with one of the harder hitting safeties in the NFL. Cameron Curl is specifically known for that. And he, again, manages to reel that shit in. Both hands. Textbook catch in that situation. And the contact and one. But he can't play through it. Now, again, admittedly, yes, that's not necessarily what his game is predicated on compared to a guy like Nacua. Well, that's fair. This is where the situation comes in where we just have to be able to appreciate both guys. Yes, Jackson Smith and Jigba is a smooth route runner and a technician of the game at that position. Similar to how you have the whole route tree unloaded for a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I have been saying this. Similar way. But we can't use that as a buzzword to just downplay what he can provide in other areas of his game. It's not a mastery, but it's not like he just can't do those things when you ask him to. That's just, to have that be said is just still outlandish to me. But I digress. Because he would just continue to cement himself. It kept going. It kept going. They get deeper into the red zone, and they get another procedural issue from Sungle here, which just can't happen. Then you have a scenario where Darnold, there's a decent amount of pressure there, and he gets the look to Jackson Smith and Jigba in the back of the end zone. He comes down with it, but it's overthrown in the back of the end zone, and he tosses the ball into the stands at that point. There is nothing you can do with it. But what happens a play later? He got it back. He got wide open against Quentin Lake. Who is it? Wide open. Nobody in the area. And Darnold, with time, had enough to see it, get the ball off before getting lit up by Jarrett Verse in the backfield. Withstanding that, a man who has haunted him for game after game after game over the last couple of seasons, stood right in the pocket and fired an absolute dime to Jackson Smith and Jigba on the side for a 14-yard touchdown catch to not only snatch back momentum in this game, but take the lead back and potentially have a chance to double dip in the second half with the starting possession. You also had Fisk and those guys getting salty. I'm like, okay, that's like, okay, bro. You got it, bro. You got it. That would be the score going into halftime, setting up for a pretty interesting third quarter, to say the least. Because, I'm not going to lie, you'll look at it. And again, whether or not you expected the performances from one quarterback in particular, both teams played as well as they possibly could have in a situation like this, in a game with these kinds of stakes. But man, this was a truly devastating moment for the Rams side of things. Because, yeah, the Seahawks had gotten off to a decent start. But with Jarrett Verse being able to redeem himself, crashing in on Sam Darnold for a sack and forcing a punt, looked like they were in smooth sailing. They got the stop that they needed to slow down progress a little bit. And you put that dynamic offense out on the field again, you're seemingly fine. Until special teams becomes a factor. And man, oh man, oh man. Like, even with me, talking about them firing their special teams coordinator a few weeks back, man, like, they have not been able to figure it out this season on that side. They just haven't. It has been something that has truly haunted them for all this damn time. And I mean, man, like, it would just become even worse in this situation. Even worse. We have to bring up Xavier Smith again. We have to. And we have to bring up the fact that this man was just so excitable in this game, honestly. Like, it got to a point where they punted his way again, testing him, seeing what he can do. He'd already muffed the one time. In the worst possible moment, he muffed it again, as the Seahawks would instantly, and I mean instantly, recover it. Derek Young was right there on the ball. Not only do you lose that possession, you give the Seahawks a chance to now just one-up themselves. You help them essentially advance all the way down the field without really needing to do all that much. And they get red zone positioning. Very next play sees Jake motherfucking Bobo working on a similar kind of corner post route that Jackson Smith and Jigba was running. Doing that, bodying up against Durant, and hauling in a touchdown catch of his own from that 17-yard range to give the Seahawks the 24-13 lead. Oh my gosh. You just gotta love it, man. We talking about more Bobo in this motherfucker. That could have been a gut punch. It already was. And it could have been brutal if the Seahawks were able to get any kind of further momentum in that regard with a potential stop, with a potential 3-and-out. But this is why Matthew Stafford is in MVP consideration. Yo, first play, they get the ball back. Job's too small to really do anything about deflecting this pass, and he just ropes it in perfectly over his hands to the traitor in Colby Parkinson for a 40-yard gain down the field. And then in just a couple plays, they target Josh Jobe again, this time manned up against Davante Adams, with again that smooth-ass release. Within just a second, Jobe stood no chance. Davante Adams got the leverage and a few steps on him up the field for a 29-yard gain. And then again, doing what he does best in the red zone, taking an out route against Tariq Woolen and taking advantage of that leverage given up for a 2-yard touchdown catch to instantly bring this down to a 24-20 ball game. Again, you can't make that shit up. Fuck. I'm like, damn, bro. Like, there's a moment for you to potentially, like, if you get a stop, like, you could do a number of things there. And without any second thought, they just instantly run right down the field again and score. But you expected those kinds of responses in a game that was this competitive for all this time throughout the season and for the large part of this game entirely. Like, this was not going to be easy for either side whatsoever. This was to be expected. But the Seahawks themselves would have just as great of a response. You know, utilizing the best efforts from Cooper Kupp and also Jackson Smith and Jigba on this drive. As to this point, they had been excelling in timely runs, the Seahawks had, but the Rams were trying their hardest to make him a non-factor in this game, and they were doing a pretty good job of it after those first couple of drives. So they had to be reliant on the passing game a little bit, and they asked Sam Darnold to do way more in this game, with him consistently answering, despite all those narratives being created about him, and despite all of those previous performances lingering in his head. He did that and then some in this game. And that would continue with him finding Cooper Kupp over on the right side of the field on an angle route. Again, catching Durant out of position and working his way into the end zone for a touchdown catch against his former team on the biggest stage. It was only a matter of time before something like that was going to happen. And they would bring themselves up to a 31-20 lead. Goodness gracious, man. All right. Man, oh man, oh man. You had yet another brutal slip from a Seahawks cornerback lead to another massive gain down the field as Davante Adams would take advantage of Devin Witherspoon again. Like, if you were a casual fan watching this game, you would truly believe that Devin Witherspoon was a bad cornerback. It wasn't pretty. Davante Adams doesn't give a fuck about that. And he would get a beautiful catch on the boundary down the field for a 35-yard gain to move the sticks for the Rams. Now, at that point, with a few procedural issues in a row from both teams, it got chaotic. I mean, you already had a previous illegal contact from Tariq Woolen, grabbing the hell out of Nacua, which you can't do, fair enough. And then they get a solid gain on the ground before you have a Larry Jackson just holding the shit out of fucking Derek Hall, man. He was grabbing all over him. He has no room to breathe at that point. So that's not a surprise. Now, the Seahawks, they take advantage of that. They contain very well, and on third down, Woolen gets the upper hand on Nacua again. He locks him down. He's chirping, he's talking his shit. You know what I'm saying? And maybe you're inclined to. Like, you're feeling yourself. Understandable. It has been a truly tumultuous season for him. And to see him perform in that way through this game, up to that point, was pretty damn good. Was definitely a relief to see, because you know that deep down under all of those struggles, you have a great cornerback on your team. The thing is, he decided to do a little extra, and he was staring down the sideline the entire time, talking all this stuff. At some point, the refs decide to throw a flag, and he gets called for taunting, and they are given an automatic first down. Now, again, I am of the belief that, again, and yes, I'm going to be a little heated about it in that particular moment if it's involving my team, but generally speaking, these taunting penalties are soft as shit in the NFL when they call them on anybody. I think every single fan, a fair amount of media analysts understand that. They're soft. They're soft. Like, hell, when they happen in the NBA, same thing. It's like, dude, like, why the fuck are we calling technical fouls for celebrating? If a player's making a play, they have all right to express themselves in the way that they want to. They're all grown men out there. There is just no way that this should be encouraged in terms of penalizing that. Like, it's natural stuff. You want these guys to just move around like robots the whole time? That's not going to happen. From that standpoint, it's ridiculous. But on the other hand, you understand that they're going to be called in those situations. And you as a player have got to understand that. So Tariq Woolen, like, was definitely just, you got to be smarter in that situation. Then to make matters even worse for him, they go right at his ass with him talking all that shit. And he proceeds to have Nacua get a nasty double move on him. And he fades back into the end zone, falling on the pylon and getting the right feet, body part combo inbounds for a touchdown instantly from 34 yards out. The epitome of instant karma, my nigga. The epitome of it. You can't have something like that happen where you are feeling yourself, talking all that shit, and then proceed to get burnt down the field on the very next play. And nigga Mawari, a rookie, has to start talking to Tariq Woolen and getting in his grill about it. That could be chaotic. It definitely could be. It wasn't the greatest look. But at the same time, you can't blame Mawari and others potentially from doing that. Like, that is a stop right there. You're off the field. You're good. You did your job. Wonderful. Just let it go. And you couldn't do that for a second. Like, that's so tough. And it gave the Rams another shot that they more than landed in a game of punch counter punch. Like, that was just tough to see. Now, the Seahawks themselves, following that, they had to go out themselves and respond. Fair enough, they would do a decent job. You know, they were backed up on 3rd and long, but no worries, as Kenneth Walker III get out in space yet again, being as dynamic as possible to move the sticks. And even Jared Talani would get himself a decent gain down the field. They also gave an open enough lane for Scrambling Sam to be activated, as he would pick up 14 yards with his legs to move the sticks into Rams territory. But with all that progress, it would come undone instantly with a boom because Cameron Kinchins, their safety, would just light up Sam Darnold. Like, they'd been doing this play action for the entire time. And naturally, it can become easier for certain defenders to pick up on that. It was the right call in that situation because you have Sam Darnold fake a run and then go out with his hand out like this to signal a potential play action play. It's a tell that, if you watch for long enough and if you're out there playing against it for long enough, you may be able to pick on it. Now, what would usually happen in that situation is that it's hidden, it's subtle. But clearly, Kinchins, and credit to him for making the play, credit to them for recognizing it. He's watching film in that situation. They dialed up the perfect call. He sent that heat, and he more than converted on it. So he decides at the same time to do a little dance himself. A similar dance to whatever it was that Amon-Ra St. Brown was doing earlier in the season. And again, in that situation, it's like, yes, he's inclined to celebrate, but by that logic, if you can have Tariq Woolen chirp like that and get called for a taunting penalty, you have him doing this right near Sam Darnold, and you have him doing this for a pretty fair amount of time, I might add, and you don't throw a flag there? So it's like, it's as it always is, where is the consistency? Where is it? That just makes no sense to me, but I digress. Either way, they would get the stop they were looking for, as you would have Jacoby Durant get pretty good coverage on a potential comeback for Rashid Shaheed. It was there, but that break on the ball was well-timed, and it got the Rams the stop they needed. Now, at this point, you've got about 12 minutes left in the game, and I think something from the Rams was telling them that, hey, maybe you needed another drive like that again. Take the air out of this crowd. Take the air out of this football team. Tire them out. Tire this defense out. And try to find a way to get down the field and take the lead. Started off well. Blake Corum would instantly pick up multiple 10-plus yard games. And even Kyron Williams himself would also work out of the backfield to get right near midfield within just a matter of 3 plays. I don't understand them trying to take a shot against Tariq Woolen as he's guarding Kanata upfield. And that promptly did not go so high. But then you'd have the traitor again work underneath on a pretty good decoy route to, buy Stafford enough time and make himself a sort of outlet for him in that situation, with him ultimately picking up the first down here. Things kind of slowed down for them as they yielded a drop from Parkinson, ironically enough, on the subsequent 3rd down. However, on 4th down, with them needing a stop potentially, and with enough trust in their God, they decided to go for it. And Stafford did the unlikeliest of things, taking advantage of a rushing opportunity, rare as that might be. He got the better of DeMarcus Lawrence. Lawrence was trying to tackle him, but he was not in good enough position. And he didn't even get the cleanest look at him. So Stafford ultimately fell forward for a 3-yard gain to continue the drive. Got even worse because things were starting to tighten up, and the Rams were continuing to make progress. They got close enough in manageable territory, but credit to the Knight no-gain tackle. They get into 3rd down, and man, this was crucial. Because on 3rd and the subsequent 4th down, you needed that defense to tighten up. And I will say, you expected McVay to be aggressive in that situation. With that talent you have on your roster, with this game having these kinds of stakes on the line, you almost had to in that situation. And on both occasions, man, you had Devin Witherspoon, even with him having a tough outing, He locked the fuck in and locked them the fuck down. Kanata Mumfield got a throw attempt from nowhere at all. And promptly on this fourth down, you had them send 9 in coverage with a 3-man pass rush. And their read on this play was Terrence Ferguson eventually. However, with the coverage going down, you see Witherspoon undercut the route, jumping in time before the ball can fully get there. And he breaks it up, which is all you needed. He had a chance at an interception, and you even had him clamoring for an offensive pass interference penalty. But nonetheless, at that point, you did what you needed to do if you're the Seahawks and get off the field. And if you're the Rams, it's tough. Now, I will say that there was a situation because you saw as we come back from the commercial break after the short TV timeout, they show that for a second there, McVay was hauling ass down the sideline. Apparently trying to get a different play call in it. Maybe he didn't think that he had the right one. And maybe, from his perspective, that might have been correct. Yes, the goal in theory, you'd want to get it to either of Puka Nacua or Devontae Adams. As other people have been mentioning with some of the stuff that I've watched. Yes, you'd want that to happen. That's so obvious. But with the way that the Hawks were trying to cover him, they made sure to throw multiple bodies over there and not give them man-to-man scenarios. Or at least have those initial man-to-man matchups and just pad another body or two to create an overload of concentration on those specific guys. Make anybody else on that play beat you if they have to, other than those two. And that's exactly what happened. I think I saw about 3 people in Puka Nacua's. I think I saw about 3 people over there. And then you also had multiple people covering Devontae Adams too. Hell, the play before, same thing. Mumfield wasn't a guy that was their primary read. They would typically look for Devontae Adams in the red zone, but Julian Love provided the safety help and was playing both that and a crossing route from another weapon on the Rams side of things. So this was played well. It's not that they were not trying to look for those guys, but the Seahawks made it abundantly clear that, we'll sell out to guard those two specifically. We don't want you targeting them in this area. We know you are. We can't allow that. At that point, the Seahawks understood that if they could get a first down, they could increase their chances of winning. It looked as though they were off to a great start as Kenneth Walker III would get yet another screenplay to move out for a 15-yard gain. And while they were backed up on a 3rd and long, as the Rams started to waste their timeouts, Cooper Kupp would break over the middle and seemingly pick up the first down. However, when you replay it consistently, I will admit that it was probably short. I'll be the first to say it. It looked as though he was a few inches short. And then people were also trying to question whether or not this was a catch. And yes, it was a catch. He was down by contact at that point. But even then, the ball was still short of the first down. And you also had them trying to recover what they thought was a fumble in real time. Because again, with the way it went in Week 16, you play until after the whistle, damn it. You play until after the whistle. Can you blame them? No. And McVay was apparently trying to challenge it. However, he just did not end up going through with it. They still lost their timeout in that situation. And so that would hurt the Rams in a way. Yeah, and I'll be the first to admit it. It looked like he was short. My thing is this. To just go ahead and flat out say that, oh, this is rigged. Dude. That catch is going to stand more than likely. And even if it comes down to a situation where it's a matter of 4th and inches, do you recognize that the Seahawks, when they run the quarterback sneak with A.J. Barner, it is one of the most effective plays. I don't even have the numbers on it, but generally, across the league, they complete and convert on those plays at a high level on 3rd and 4th down. So I can promise you right now, if it came down to a situation where they were on their own side of the field, in a 4th and inches situation, with multiple timeouts being wasted by the Rams in this case, they were more than likely going to dial that play up, and there's a high percentage that they would have gotten it anyways, ultimately leading to the same thing. So that would be my note to people who are just blindly throwing that out there. Just understand that nugget first before throwing out all that BS. Like, that's ridiculous. But from that point, the Seahawks would continue to keep away with the football. I am kind of surprised that they threw on this 2nd down after the Rams wasted their last timeout. But who else but JSN, again, making Quentin Lake look like a fool. Made him bite aggressively, if I do say so myself, on an in route as he broke right back out to the outside, caught him stumbling and hauled in a 14-yard catch to move the sticks there. At that point, all the Seahawks really kept on doing was running the football. They did go for another pass, but Durant with another penalty, untimely, I might add, for the Rams, they would essentially put the game on ice. Now, there were a few negative plays here, but again, at that point, the Seahawks are set. All you have to do is keep running down the time. The Rams not only have to score a touchdown, but they would have to drive the length of the field in about 20 or so seconds to do so, as Brady had continued to point out. And at that point, the Seahawks, in that scenario, playing as much man up 3 deep and as much prevent as possible. As long as nothing gets behind you, and as long as you continue to protect the boundaries, you're set. And on both plays, they did a great job of doing that. You would have Nacua get the initial gain, and again, it took them about 14 seconds to run that. They kept them in bounds, and they forced another situation where everyone's manned up. You have safeties deep and over the top trying to guard that. They work in the crossing route to Nacua, and he does catch it. The thing is, with his knee going down in bounds, the Seahawks would clinch the NFC Conference Championship game, becoming champions of that conference with a 31-27 win, as they will represent the NFC in the Super Bowl against the Patriots in a matchup that is a rematch of Super Bowl 49. And we all know how that went. And even when it comes to that, I can briefly allude to that for a little bit. Not to necessarily, go full projection mode, but man, what a time. What a time, man. It feels so fucking great to be in that position. That game itself, I'm not a person that necessarily, operates with I don't get stressed out or anything like that. But man, I was thinking about that game for pretty much the entire week. And again, as I said in the last one, I had confidence in my team, but you just want, in that situation, you want them to go out and play. You gotta wait for all that time as a fan to see them handle it. Hey, they got it done no matter what. And that's what it ended up coming down to. The defense, it was not their best performance. But they got it done. They got the stop that they needed to get. And when push came to shove, on all 3 phases, they handled their business. At all 3 phases, man. And that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. Man, oh man, oh man. I mean, bruh, I can't start any further then without addressing the Sam Darnold shit. Yes, you at this point now are expecting one more game from this entire Seahawks team to accomplish the ultimate goal in the sport. But what are they going to say about Sam Darnold now? A man who became, in this game with this win, one of 4 quarterbacks to win 30 or more games in a 2-season span with multiple teams, including the likes of Drew Brees, Patrick Mahomes, and Tom Brady, including regular season and postseason games. That's what Sam Darnold's been doing. And to think about this from this perspective, the Rams had been just nightmare fuel for this man for the past couple of seasons. It's been very evident. 6 turnovers across 2 games against this team this season. And on the biggest stage in an environment that he's never experienced before, compared to the man opposite him. One could argue that he outplayed his ass and went toe-to-toe with him for the game of his life. 25 of 36 passing on 69.4% completion with 346 yards in 3 scores through the air. And it wasn't just him consistently settling for these routine throws. The man said he did exactly what he said he was going to do. He let it rip all day long. In the face of the simulated pressure that had been haunting him for the last few games against this team, he stood up. He held firm in that pocket. He made plays out of the pocket when he needed to. Smart with the football, made calculated reads all game long. And when it came time for him to answer the call, with people consistently saying that he could not be the reason or a key reason in the success of this team, he shut all that shit up and walked them niggas down to take them to the Super Bowl. If that doesn't show you that the man himself has evolved, if that doesn't show you that the narrative about the man has changed, I already said it in week 16 when they faced off against each other and he had that performance in the second half in overtime to go out and win. That doesn't show you right there. I don't know what to tell you anymore. I just don't. Like, yes, this is a man who has been through shit in his career. Coming out of college, the man was seen as a turnover machine, as an overly aggressive quarterback who could not be trusted. And that was from his college days when he was at USC. Gets into the league with the Jets, and they don't do anything to really help him in that situation. Leading to, some of the worst first few years that a rookie quarterback or a young up-and-comer could have in that situation. The development there was just non-existent. And it put him in such a terrible position. Yes, the play didn't help matters. The seeing ghost shit against the Patriots did not help matters. But it was a living football nightmare for him there. And it left him into a situation where it's like, okay, you cannot be trusted as a starting caliber quarterback in this league anymore. We are shipping you off all over the place now. You're essentially an NFL journeyman. Man was in Carolina with Baker Mayfield. Man was on a Super Bowl roster backing up Brock Purdy just a couple of years ago. Ironically enough. And through all of that, through all the ups and downs in his early career, he still was able to bounce back, still able to learn information on the fly in these situations, at all these different stops, with all these different coaches. Whether you look at Kyle Shanahan and whether you look at especially Kevin O'Connell with what he was able to do with Minnesota last season. And they still with him still having those same things flare up, that he could not get it done in high leverage situations, that he thrived mainly from a system and could not take over a game on his own volition, and that he was going to consistently crumble under pressure. That entire sequence of having a shot at the 1 seed last season, losing it in very, very underwhelming fashion to the Lions, and then facing off against the Rams in that wild card game as they were coming off of dealing with the wildfires at that time, getting boat raced against that team and having a horrible performance. 9 fucking sacks in that game. And those struggles against the Rams carrying over into this season, Minnesota, they decided to jump the gun. They decided to let him walk and put a little more faith in J.J. McCarthy. And he gets to Seattle and he shows you the same thing. Now, yes, the second half of the season was not the prettiest for the offense as a whole. They had definitely tailed off a little bit in efficiency in terms of explosive plays down the field. That has been well documented. But in that Week 16 game, he summoned that maturity. And he embraced the moment. He took it and strangled a pull on it that he has not looked back from since that moment. I was watching something, and essentially they've said he's had just a single turnover since that point of time. Just one. Since the second half of that game. Just one. No, they didn't ask him to do a lot in the game against the 49ers with the way that that defense had been playing. But when push came to shove in this one, a man that had been through all of that in the earliest years of his career, put that on display for you. Showed you that he can and will take over a football game. Will vault a team to victory with his contributions. Can be smart with the football. Can make those throws with accurate timing. And above all else, that this team trusts the hell out of what he is doing. Hell, you heard some of the commentary as I was watching the broadcast of the first game. They were playing conservative and playing to make sure that Sam Darnold did not cost them the game. Well, he more than went out there and played aggressive, had a good amount of balance between, making passive reads and being aggressive, taking a bit more than what the defense was giving you, enforcing the action on his own hand. And he got it done at a high rate, at an efficient rate, without turning the ball over a single time against a team that was supposed to be his kryptonite. And now, that man just became the first quarterback from the 2018 class to reach a Super Bowl. The first one. Not Baker Mayfield. Damn sure not Josh Rosen. Not Josh Allen. Not Lamar Jackson. None of those guys. Sam Darnold. The one who they said could not reach elite status in this league once upon a time, has now got a chance to do even more than just that. And this entire team, man, it's so great to see. The run game, again, 2.9 yards per carry on 75 yards was not best compared to what they'd been doing for the last few weeks. But again, at key moments, they got it done. It was serviceable, and it was enough to win the game. Pretty much every single guy who got the football out of the backfield in this game made an impact. And again, that is no greater than, there's no greater impact than JSN in this game. As with 10 receptions, 153 yards, and a touchdown in his second playoff game, he became the first Seahawk to log those numbers. The very first one. As I said beforehand, leading up to talking about this game, no matter where you line him up, no matter what you do in terms of trying to stop him, that man is going to find a way to either get the ball or make enough of an impact so if you're going to watch him aggressively, open up room for another receiver to contribute. Rashid Shaheed had the lone catch for 51 yards, but it was a huge play as far as this game is concerned. Because again, Darnold came out and showed you early that this nigga was not bucking around. Cooper Kupp, again, 4 receptions for 36 yards. It hasn't been a great season for him in terms of overall production. But again, with being able to serve as a mentor for Jackson Smith and Jigba, and as I've said before, it's documented. He said that about Cooper Kupp. And the man who was previously a Super Bowl MVP with the Rams comes through in the game against them and makes some timely catches, including a different third down as well to move the sticks. Where it seemed like pressure was going to get there, he leaks out in the flat and is able to make enough of a move on McCulloch and those guys to move the first, or to get the first down in that situation. Kenneth Walker as well had 4 receptions and 49 yards out of the backfield. And Jake Bobo, again, the 17-yard touchdown catch. It's exceptional work. And again, defense. For one time, they didn't need the onus to be all on them to dictate how a game would go. But again, when the time came for them to make stops, they did. They were able to force those early sequences with field goals. And they were able to, as the Rams were trying to be aggressive, lock them down completely to effectively seal the game. Major stuff. So, the Seahawks in Super Bowl 60 in Santa Clara, ironically enough for 49ers fans, will be facing off against the Patriots. And only one team can be left standing in that scenario. To briefly address the game, not to project or anything. Again, you know where I stand here already. It goes without saying, okay? But in terms of the game itself, if you thought that the Broncos and Pats game was going to be decided by those little details, this game is going to be very similar. Again, you have multiple teams where they both want to play ahead of schedule. That is no secret about how either one of them run their offense. And the Patriots in that game, you can chalk that up to weather. You can chalk that up to how the Broncos defense played throughout that game. They were not that great in that situation in the game, and they have not been that great in that situation throughout the entire postseason. When you look at it, the Patriots in this game, as I'm seeing right now, 6 of 18 on third down is not the greatest in the world. Now again, the game-sealing third down is going to stand out above all the rest. And again, it's a testament to the Patriots' ability to be able to find a way to win the game regardless of the circumstances, despite being that young with veteran talent flanking those guys. That is huge from their perspective. So it's not like you can just completely say, oh, the Patriots stand no chance whatsoever. But if you are repeatedly getting in situations where Drake May is under pressure like this, and they have to constantly continue to fall behind the sticks, that is not going to be a pretty situation. And likewise for Seattle. Yes, the Patriots did also beat 3 different top 5 defenses on their way there to the Super Bowl. And you still have people saying that the Seahawks defense is potentially the most feared, regardless of them also being a top 5 defense, finishing at another rank in terms of the overall leaderboard there. So, you have got to be careful in those scenarios. Man, this is going to be incredibly interesting. Man, the Seahawks themselves in this game held the Rams to 1 of 8 on third down, as they themselves are 7 of 13. They also forced Matthew Stafford to, for the first time in his playoff career, not complete a single pass on third down out of 7 attempts. And Sam Darnold, on the other hand, was money, going 6 of 9 with an over 90 QBR in those situations. So again, if you can garner control there, you give yourself a great opportunity to win outright. The run game could also be a weapon potentially for New England. Now again, the Seahawks themselves, over the past few weeks, have done a much better job of running the football in an efficient manner. But again, you have a much better pairing of running backs in terms of their overall ability. Like Kenneth Walker III will probably enter this game as the best running back on the field. But the combination of Ramondre Stevenson and Travion Henderson with what they have been able to do across a few games this season probably offer you a little more overall than what the combo of Walker III and Holani can do for you at the moment. If Charbonnet was in this game, that might change it up just a little bit. But, that would just be nitpicking. That would just be nitpicking, to be honest with you. With the way that the Patriots run their offense, though, in terms of, and I guess the Seahawks do in a similar way with, getting routine throws in there and occasionally taking those deep shots. Though the Seahawks, again, especially when they were, seemingly getting an explosive play on every other one earlier in the season, they run them far more, so that could be a difference. And again, that's going to be dictated mainly by their overall receiver core compared to the Pats. It's a lot stronger in that regard. The Pats' primary focus is going to be either one of Stephon Diggs or Hunter Henry at one time. And with him being more of a possession guy, those inside runs are going to be important to set up opportunities, to get, hitch routes, flat routes, anything you can to generate reads for him to get the ball in his hands. That's going to be the key for the Pats in this game on the offensive side. And, similarly, on the Seahawks side, again, you know that they're going to try to zone in on Jackson Smith and Jigba. But again, how exactly are you going to go about moving them around the field? You have plays packaged for other guys to make their own impact out of the backfield. Man, it would be so good if Torrey Horton was available for this game. But I digress. And of course, man. Of course, bro. Man. Above all that other stuff, I'll say right now even that one of the matchups that would be specifically interesting to me would be Marcus Jones and Rashid Shaheed. Not just as return specialists, but as matchups primarily against each other. They obviously play both offense and defense, respectively. And again, Marcus Jones got a contract extension for a reason. That man is underrated as a cornerback in this league. and is dynamic as a punt returner and a kick returner. There's no question about that. Rashid Shaheed as a burner himself and also as a dynamic return specialist. It just adds yet another layer to a game that could be very wild, if I do say so myself. So that would be what I'd be looking for in that scenario. Yeah, this is just like, man, you just, if you're both teams, you're taking it in, and the fans are definitely going to be celebrating for a while. But you would understand that in that scenario, man, there's a lot to go through. You have to pack to get ready to go to Santa Clara. You have to set up all your stuff there. You have to go through the walkthroughs and everything. And then not to mention everything that goes down there. You know, I think as I was watching the halftime show, you had a person allude to the fact that the Super Bowl can be a little corporate at times. And at that point, you might be right. But when you have that many people watching around the world on average, and last year's Super Bowl just set the all-time mark for viewership of the big game, right? Like, you have that kind of attention on it around the world. And not to mention that you have people spending an exorbitant amount of funds for commercials for it. You already had allusions to a few different Super Bowl commercials for, like, State Farm and other brands. Like, they take this shit very seriously. So you can understand that you're going to have to be there for Media Day as well. It's a lot to take in. But, hey, you're there. You were most certainly there. The Pro Bowl is also coming up for those guys, and I do believe that the goal is for, players all over, no matter whether they are in the Super Bowl or not, to be participating. So you may get a good chance to see some Pats in Seahawks guys play. Obviously, they may not do it for the full time, and they're definitely going to be careful. Like, you're not engaging in too much contact there. That's why it's flag football now. And if it's going to be an exhibition, you can understand why they transitioned to that. But they may appear in that game. So that should be pretty interesting as a little bit of a holdover before the actual game takes place. But man, like I said, what a time, dude. What a fucking time. What a time. And then I can wrap this up talking about the Rams' outlook on things. Along with the Broncos, seeing as both of their seasons ended, I guess it just makes sense to pair it up that way. When looking at the Rams, fuck the Rams. In all seriousness, you have to respect what they were able to do. Truly was a masterclass of two great offenses going at it and trying to outsmart the other throughout this game. They played as well as they possibly could have, especially from that standpoint. And when you look at Matthew Stafford here, in a year that may very well be his first MVP season, depending on how voters vote, he put together a 374-yard performance with 3 touchdown passes on 62.9% completion. Like, he was just as good in this game for this team. And especially heated up in the second half where the Rams overall had control. They had the advantage in yardage. They had the advantage in time of possession. And they were generally more effective in terms of scoring. So he did his job. It is definitely heartbreaking for them that they could not get over the hump here and fully overcome a team that, again, you're harboring all that against. You were in this position as it was because you lost that game in Week 16 with all those different plays, and you get a chance to take them down again, and you get that damn close, and again, you have more untimely plays affecting your ability to win the damn game. It sucks. It just sucks. Their rushing attack was much better, and they were able to initiate that to take a little bit of the burden off for some well-timed balance with 114 yards on the ground on 5.2 yards per carry amongst all their rushers. Like, that's pretty damn good. And when you look at the receivers as well, especially the main two guys, Nacua, like, yo, there's no question that he himself is also a receiver. Quickly emerging as one of the best in the league. Pro Football Focus ranked him as the best. He has been on a pretty historical tear in his first 3 seasons of play as a wide receiver, rivaling that of some of the better receivers in NFL history all time. And he was a 5th round guy. Nobody was expecting this man to develop into that kind of player. And here we are with him still, even with more focus being put on him, and even if it wasn't quite to the same extent, it was still inevitable in this game. 9 catches for 165 yards and a touchdown for him. He was going toe-to-toe himself. No matter what they threw at him, he also had a response, more often than not. And yet, still, they could not get it done. Also, Davante Adams in this game, 4 receptions for 89 yards and a touchdown. Now, I mentioned Stephon Diggs earlier in the video and said that he was one of 2 to be some of the most prolific wide receivers in the postseason when it came to overall catches without reaching a Super Bowl. Well, that other guy happened to be none other than Davante Adams. And I believe that with his 4 catches in this game, he probably got right back at or near the initial mark that Diggs held in terms of most catches in a postseason without reaching a Super Bowl. Well, unfortunately for him, not only does he now hold that outright, but is now also 0-5 in championship games as a player. And when you look at it from Davante Adams' perspective, you truly don't know how many more opportunities you're going to get. It's a great season from him, but he's 33 years old. So you genuinely have to question just how much longer you can do this as a player, first and foremost, and still continue to fall short. And it feels like it's always something. Because with those Green Bay teams, it felt like there were opportunities to get it done. Yet you allow, in that game, yourself, with a younger Kyle Shanahan at that point, in one of his first seasons there, to have that running back by committee system with Matt Breida and Raheem Mostert run all over you for about over 270 yards or something like that, unless I'm mistaken. But all those damn rushing yards in the championship game for them to get beaten. And then you have a different year where you have Rodgers facing off against Brady in the championship game with him now being a Buck. And you just completely have Rodgers shit the bed in the 4th quarter of that game to lose it and have the Bucks advance to the Super Bowl. It's always something with Davante Adams when it comes to getting there, putting in his own contributions as a player to ensure that they can get over the top, and they still don't. It sucks. And just as much of a relief as it might have been for Stephon Diggs to finally reach a Super Bowl, you get even more despair. I think they were mentioning Davante Adams couldn't even really speak all that much. That's how much it hurts to consistently fall short in this league, even with things that aren't fully in your control. That is just the way it can be. And as much as we can provide praise for those teams that can get over all of that and get it done, man, those stories from those others that have those kinds of situations go down can't fall on deaf ears. And when you look at this game, yet again, all three phases of the game went well for the Seahawks. Well, just about one was truly firing on all cylinders for a good portion of this game. And yes, the defense was able to get some stops at times. They were able to force 3 sacks on Sam Darnold, who wasn't completely clean. But they didn't nearly do what they were expecting to do, as Cameron Curl so blatantly put it everywhere. They didn't even get close to that. Because they allowed him to, again, take a hold of what was happening. They allowed him to completely move them around with his eyes, get out on improv, and start extending plays that would benefit him in the long haul. And more often than not, they did. Plus, that third down efficiency. At some point, you have got to be able to get off the football field. And they were not able to. Not nearly consistently enough to give themselves a fair shot of winning this game. And the fact that Matthew Stafford still gave them life is a testament to just how good he has been this season. Just how great that offense has been for them this season. But if this had to be a shootout, you could not constantly rely on that forever. And they were already coming into this on a tough stretch where, after they'd been one of the best defenses in the NFL for the first half of the season, they completely tailed off in the last half, allowing multiple 30-point games to the Panthers of all teams, allowing the Falcons to take them down and spot a 21-0 lead at halftime, essentially. And then getting in that kind of chess match against the Bears, where, yes, you did come out ultimately having a better overall defensive game with, forcing Caleb Williams into some just stupid throws, but he also managed to pull off one of the greatest plays you'll ever see from any player in a loss to tie up that game and send it to overtime when it had no business to getting to that extent if you just finish the game. And coverage was atrocious for the Rams in that regard. Now again, their strength is their pass rush. It's very clear that the strength is going to be in their pass rush. And sometimes you just can't help that. But I look specifically at the cornerbacks. Because I'm not going to lie, I was watching a nightcap video talking about the game specifically. And they just take a shot at the entire secondary, essentially. And I don't wholly agree with that. The cornerbacks need a massive improvement. You're working with Roger McCreary Jr., you're working with a Darius Williams on his second stint with the team, and much older at this point. And Emmanuel Forbes Jr. was sitting out the first half of this game with an apparent shoulder injury, and even when he got back into the game in the second half, we know exactly what Emmanuel Forbes Jr. is. Shoulder injury or not, he's a fucking cone. And when those are your top 3 cornerbacks, that can be a bit of an issue. Jacoby Durant gets moved around. I guess you could say he's a cornerback. He gets moved around in different places. He's solid. Maybe these guys aren't household names, but you would generally need to revamp that room. You got to get somebody there who is legitimately feared, because those 3 aren't it. Their safeties, again, maybe they aren't household names themselves, but between Cameron Kinchins, Jordan McCulloch, and Quentin Lake, again, if he was one of the key pieces coming back for this Rams team before the game even took place, I'd argue that those 3 guys are pretty damn good. And yes, Lake himself, as I said, he got torched in this fucking game. Let's call it what it is. He got torched. But generally for them, he's been a good player as a sort of nickel safety hybrid. That's what he's been for them. And you're not just going to completely move on from him. So I'd argue, again, like, yes, the Rams overall, defensively, they could use some help. But not at the safety position specifically. If you can get some solid corners on that front, that'll help you out. Like, mind you, Curry is only there because of what they were able to do at the trade deadline to get him. That's how bad it was. And it could have been much worse if McCurry Jr. did not show up for them in terms of, handling the cornerback position. So that is something that they'll have to look into this offseason. Also, special teams. Yes, they fired Chase Blackburn, as I mentioned a few weeks ago. After, ironically enough, the Week 16 game. But you still have those issues with execution. So maybe Blackburn wasn't the problem? Like, seriously, that Xavier Smith play is not something that any player on offense or defense can control. But it might have been the single most important play in this game. You prevented the double dip opportunity if you are the defense. And you have a chance to get the ball right back. Potentially go down and score a touchdown. Instead, you have a full 14-point swing, in theory, as you allow them to get the ball right back and instantly put up a touchdown catch for Bobo. That changed everything. And ultimately, the Rams, despite their best efforts, couldn't overcome something as simple and as seemingly routine as that. Just fielding a punt. Ultimately, they are a team that, as constructed, can still be championship contenders. The main question is going to be, though, because when you look at this, like, it's not even like they have to worry about paying too many guys outside of potentially Puka Nacua. He's, going to be entering that territory soon. So that might be something they contemplate. Outside of that, though, not really anybody else. And you don't have the draft capital to really wield anything there. Maybe they can sneak in a trade. Maybe they can sneak in a move in free agency. But you don't have a lot of room in that regard. It's not all about the quarterback, but what is Stafford's next move? Does he feel that he has another few seasons in him? I'm sure he probably does. Like, there's no way that I'd be hearing anything about him. Like, again, not to assume. Bro, he's not going to take a step back this season. Like, he's going to remain as their guy for at least the near future. But, as he gets up there in age, that is something that they may have to address eventually. And yeah, that would really be it for their perspective. Now, for the Broncos. Oh, boy. As far as the context of the game itself, instant regret, you feel. Not even just about the field goal and the decision to not go for that in the first half, but just some of the other stuff situationally was so bad. And, coming into this game, everybody's praising Sean Payton for being such a tactician, for being a smart offensive mind. Well, I don't know what the hell was going on with him in this game. It's like you're an established vet. You understand the nuances, so we can't have that excuse. But with the game on the line, with the season on the line, you resort to some of the worst possible decisions at the worst possible times. And you were still in this game. You just needed to make a few, and I mean a few, like it literally came down to a matter of that. Just a few smarter decisions in this game probably grant you the win. Probably. It's like, at that point, man, what else can you expect anybody to do? Like, that is full-on coaching malpractice. Like, everything else needed to go as it did. You had the home field advantage. You had, in theory, an advantage in weather with you understanding not only how Denver is when it comes to snow, but also with the altitude. It's called Mile High for a reason, okay? You understood that, and you held that advantage. You were well within this game for a while. And the Patriots themselves were not doing anything flashy on their end. But they were able to, again, outsmart you a few times. And that proved to be just enough. Man, the Broncos overall did fairly well. Jarrett Stidham, honestly, they were fearing that they were going to lose the game specifically because of him. Not necessarily, honestly. Like, yes, you can hold the pick against him, but honestly, for what they were asking him to do out there, he really didn't do all that bad. He didn't. You know, he may not be at that point where he's going to go out and take over a game and win you one, but damn. I mean, at that point, again, the lack of a run game, just 3.3 yards on the ground. And again, injuries can't be controlled. Okay? J.K. Dobbins, out. Pat Bryant II did return in this game and then got taken back out with an apparent hamstring injury. They happen. Even on the Patriots side, they lost Robert Spillane in this game to an ankle injury. Even, with some of the final teams, making it solely because of just how durable they can be compared to other teams in the league. At the same time, with what you have, they got to be able to step up at some point. And the fact that a rushing attack was not established in this game is also just a crime to me. Especially considering that, again, I don't know what it has been this postseason with Courtland Sutton. He is the best wide receiver that they have, but the connection, whether you look at it being with Bo Nix or even with Jarrett Stidham in this game, something about it was just off. And I really don't know how to explain that. I will say, moving forward, the Broncos probably want to find a way to, shore up on that position. I do think, honestly, the way that Pat Bryant II had been playing, maybe he's a guy that can emerge as a complimentary wide receiver to Courtland Sutton for them. So maybe they don't need to blow the whistle so early on that experiment and just draft another one out of excess. But, I mean, to put all the onus on a guy like Marvin Mims Jr. does not seem like the wisest decision in the world. This defense did as best as they could. I tell you, they did. You can say what you want about Jonah Ellis having to be the one to chase down Drake May in that situation. I'd much rather have Nick Bonito out there potentially trying to hawk him down. You have a way better shot. But again, they've been pushed to the limit. In the same way that you could argue the Texans were last week against this Patriots team. They are being asked to go out there time and time and time again with an offense that largely had not been doing anything. And more often than not, they'd come through. That moment right there was them essentially expressing that, man, we have given it our all. We are absolutely tired. Like, this game truly was a matter of outlasting the other. in terms of willpower, in terms of grit, in terms of going man up and smash mouth football and saying that either I am going to impose my will against you and there's nothing that you can do about it on the offensive side, or I'm going to completely shut down your offense and make you feel every single hit with the cold weather in play on the defensive side. It's that kind of ball game for both teams, and both defenses deserve praise for playing that way and playing that way for so long in adverse conditions. But the Broncos, it just became a little too much for them to handle. It truly did. And that is why they ended up losing this game. They just have got a lot to think about this offseason. And as I said, man, Sean Payton is going to be kicking himself for a while over some of the decisions that he ended up making. Like, there is just genuinely no joke about that whatsoever. But that'll do it for this video. What a time spending talking about just those two games. I can only imagine how it'll be when we get into handling the Super Bowl itself. Quick note about that as well before I cap it off. Mike McDonald becomes the third youngest coach to reach a Super Bowl in NFL history. So there you go. But I hope you guys, through all of it, did enjoy the video. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.